Good morning, everyone. We have quite a busy agenda today, so I'd like to get started properly. I'm sure others will still be joining us, but let's get started. I'm just going to kick proceedings off by really introducing our new Vice Chancellor, Professor Peter Kaufman. Peter joined us in July, and we're just going to hear from Peter now in a moment about his reflections in the role as we go forward. And then we have some updates from me, updates from Caroline, and also from Mary and from Rick. So without further ado, do come in. There's more seats over here. Peter Kaufman.
Thank you very much, Chris, and welcome to all of you. It's an honour and a privilege to address you as Vice Chancellor. What I was going to also do was welcome the 75 new starters whose names were supposedly on the board, but no doubt they will reappear the names. Welcome those of you who are here this morning. It's been a great pleasure to come back to the University of London. As you're probably aware, I'm very familiar with the University of London. Indeed, for nearly 2 decades. I was a senator and I was a councillor on the University of London in the distant past. And I think importantly, what I have been doing over the past few months is going around meeting with as many of you, and I will continue to do so, but also heads of the member institutions of the university. And what has been very striking is the way that they are, to a person, so supportive of the Central University, and they better understand the direction of the Central University. And in my conversations, what they say very much is they appreciate how much the Central University looks to support its members, whether that be in relation to student accommodation, whether that be looking at opportunities for sharing teaching space, but importantly, the increasing growth and potential of University of London worldwide and what that offers to its member institutions, and the University of London in Paris and what that may well offer post-Brexit. And goodness knows what's going to happen post-Brexit. And all the other central activities within the university. And that's important because this afternoon, all being well, the second reading of the bill to create universities within the University of London, so to enable our member institutions to be universities in their own right, will go through the House of Commons. It got stymied last time because it got caught up with Sir Christopher Chope and his objections to private members' bills, because it came actually on the day they were going to debate upskirting, and the University of London was not part of upskirting, but part of the private members' bill. And so, as a consequence, things were delayed. So fingers are firmly crossed for this afternoon. We anticipate the Minister is going to be present, and we know the Minister is supportive. The other point of importance is the ongoing considerations of USS pensions, and you're probably aware of the recommendations from the joint expert panel. We have a meeting of the Board of Trustees tomorrow, and we shall be recommending as the university that we support those recommendations of the joint expert panel, except that does create potentially more risk for the university, but we think it important to try and support our employees by restricting their contributions. Having said that, of course, the university's contributions are likely to increase as an employer, and that obviously has an impact on our bottom line, and Chris will be talking about finances very shortly. I have some very good news about the University of London worldwide, because the Ministry of Education in China has now agreed to recognise our Chinese students who take the programme in Singapore Institute of Management. They will now recognise the University of London degree. That's very important going forward, and the potential is enormous for us. So congratulations to University of London worldwide. Not an easy way of getting that through, but they have been very persistent, and it's fantastic. I'm delighted also to announce that within SAS, Professor Carl Stitching is going to be the new director of the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and he's coming from City University and will be starting in January 2019. We've also experienced healthy recruitment to SAS for last month. There's 120 new students who are starting, so again, good news. In terms of awards and other matters to celebrate, the University of London Worldwide has been shortlisted for a Times Higher Award on International Impact. I'm sure Mary will be telling you more about that shortly, but congratulations again to University of London Worldwide. The ground floor space of Senate House, you will be pleased to learn, has been shortlisted for an Interior Design Award by FX Awards. Not certain what FX Awards are, but it sounds great. Senate House, as some of you may have noticed, featured in The Bodyguard and Killing Eve. Exposed more than perhaps we all expected. And I think as partially as a result of that, on the open day, Senate House, despite the pouring rain, witnessed over 900 visitors, which was a record. And that's only a good thing for people to actually understand and appreciate this fantastic building. Professors Barry Smith and Dr. Michael Eads will be on Radio 4 next week. It's the Kitchen Cabinet. It's 10:30 on the 20th of October. All of you, of course, will be hard at work, but please do listen if you can. And CoSector hosted a postgraduate fair last week, and there was well over 2,000 students, and you probably were aware of the queue of students around the building, but that was a very successful undertaking. Congratulations to CoSector. And the second charter lecture, the guest speaker was Shona Olney from the United Nations, and that was a lecture that kicked off a worldwide conversation for the Leading Women campaign. And again, Mary will tell you a little bit more about that shortly. And then up and coming for next month, the 15th to the 24th of November, it's the 5th Being Human Festival, and I encourage you to attend as many of the activities as you can. This is both a local but also a worldwide activity with partner universities in the UK and in Australia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Just got a few notices from me, and then what I thought I'd do is, in a moment, share with you some of the thoughts about what comes next in terms of the next 5 years. But first of all, am I doing this or you can't? Okay. Notices from the pump. I've got an annual fire practice on October the 23rd, but it's going to be with a twist, and I need you to look at the intranet to find out about that. But one of the exits is going to be deliberately closed to force you to find alternative routes to escape. Alright, so beware of that. It's on October the 23rd, and look at the internet. Peter mentioned university finances. We're just putting the annual accounts to conclusion, and the external auditors are looking at it. And I thought it would be useful to share with you this analysis. It shows at a departmental level the university. And bottom line, you'll see actually last year we did about £1.8 million better than forecast. That still puts us in a £1 million deficit for last year. But we were forecasting a £2.8 million deficit. But the reason for that are two exceptional items. We had a lease that was let to Birkbeck. That's going to be once in a 100-year opportunity. And we had a legacy from someone, from an alumnus that died. So we have benefited from two windfalls. If it hadn't been for that 1.8 million that we had unexpectedly, then we would have been a lot worse off. And I think we've got to be aware of that as we go forward. We're adverse to budget in quite a number of areas in the university for various different reasons. And as we go forward with the additional costs that Peter outlined there on pensions, but also pay and also FM, we've got to have that first and foremost in our minds. This year, we had a flatline budget. We did not take any inflation into this year's budget for 18-19. I'd anticipate exactly the same plus some more for the 19-20 budget. And directors are already working on ways in which we can manage our costs and keep within our means. The next notice is around the Vice-Chancellor appointment, Peter's successor, who should be joining us next year. We've had an extensive search. Hodges and Burnside have been undertaking the search for us. The shortlist was undertaken a few weeks ago, and we're interviewing currently. I'm hoping that some announcements should be coming out in the next few weeks, but just suffice to say we've got some excellent candidates, and I fully expect an appointment. The calibre of the candidates is really quite exceptional. University of London Pride. The university will be participating in London Pride next year, and more than that, we will also be working collaboratively with our members, some of whom are already participating in London Pride. If anyone would like to get involved in this, then please contact Mark Harrison, who you'll be seeing on the stage in a moment. And we're going to get a bit of a working group together as to just how much glitter we can afford and so forth. But it should be quite an event, so please join me in that. And now to the forecasting and where we go next. I've printed just one page of the operating plan for this current year, 18-19. It's not going to be printed, and this is just the front cover. It's available electronically. It was distributed yesterday, and it shows what we're doing in our last year of our current 5-year plan. What I want to do next is really describe some of the kites that are currently being flown with regards to what goes into the next 5-year plan. These are conversations that we've been having both at BCG and at Collegiate Council, and they're ideas that we're starting to air with the candidates for the Vice-Chancellorship, but also the next Vice-Chancellor will want to bring his or her own ideas. Some of the kites are improbable, like a penguin flying, but there are others that are sort of variations on the theme, maybe working better, and others are really managing to different prevailing conditions. But the first one is really more of the same, but probably more than we are currently doing with regards to our role in London as a civic university. We have a huge tradition of being the catalyst for change. We were founded in the 19th century. It's almost the antidote to Oxford and Cambridge. We are the People's University, and we're also very cited in London. I think we should be making more of that as we go forward, particularly as the geopolitics and also UK politics change. There's an awful lot of emphasis on regionalisation at the moment, and that could be to the detriment of London. But also, as we leave Europe, London is going to become even more significant as an international city, and I think we are probably the biggest international city for higher education in the world, and we need to assert that. And as the premier federal university in the UK, well, the only one probably in the UK, but the premier one in London, I think we need to have a very proactive role in that. We will continue, I dare say, in shared services. We have some fabulous shared services, and if you look back at the previous slide, both of them are doing really well in terms of co-sector and the careers group. The careers group is now by far the largest, probably in the world, definitely in Europe, and it's increased in size considerably over the last few years in terms of how the members are brought into it. Co-sector 2 is now returning a very good surplus to the university, much higher than was anticipated last year. So both doing well. But you see in the bottom left-hand corner, there are new ideas emerging about shared services. And there's one in particular that's got a lot of currency, and that's around well-being, about student mental health and student well-being more general. It's a big ticket item at the moment. Lots of universities are struggling with it. And I think that we can be more than the sum of our parts if we collaborate on it. But there are more ideas of this ilk, particularly around how we work together as a federal university and as peer organisations rather than anything top-down. The University of London bill is going to be very significant as universities within the university, and we work with our members and collaboratively with our members rather than sort of the old stuff. We will continue to invest in property, and I've heard some people sort of lament that we're becoming a property company. We're definitely not a property company. We are a university first and foremost, and we are actually starting to distinguish between those properties that we own that are strategically important academically and those that are actually there to earn a keep. And one of those ones that's very strategically important to us is the fourth quadrant of Senate House. And we've seen previously presentations on this, but there's the artist's impression of what that might look like on the far right there. But we're also a provider of accommodation for our members. Very significantly, we provide over 3,000 bed spaces already, but we have an aspiration to get to 5, probably 6,000. The Cartwright Gardens building now did two things. It provided superb accommodation for our members. It's one of the most popular halls of residence in London. It also provided £40 million to the university, some of which we enabled us to renew the ground lease to the Skinners Company, some of which enabled us to invest in the building itself, and some of which was given to us as a capital release, which is now funding, or did fund, part of the IHR. We did the topping out ceremony a few weeks ago for Duncan House, and a very similar financial model there released over £12 million. £12 million of capital release is roughly equivalent to the costs of the refurbishment of the IOS building. Buildings are essential to our finances, and anyone that says that they are a distraction needs to wake up and smell the coffee. The other next two are really where I think the next strategic plan needs to focus, and it's around our academic activities, and it's where Mary and Rick in a moment are going to really focus their attention. We have a huge opportunity. Our brand is immense. It still has a lot of traction around the world. We have an immense presence and a very strong tradition in distance learning and transnational education. Sorry, to go on to that one in a moment. This one's about SAS. We have a huge profile with regards to the School of Advanced Study. And last year, David Cantor won the award for in human rights. And being human rights is coming up, and Rick will tell us more about that in the future. But could SAS become more? We've seen how the government's invested in different centres for excellence in the UK, the curriculum, the Turing and so forth. But who is the spokesperson and the convener, the collaborator for the arts and humanities? And perhaps the University of London is well placed to fit that role. With regards to worldwide, we also have an excellent profile there, and one where I think we can actually do far more. We still have a relatively small presence in the UK. We could be building on that. We also have opportunities with regards to changing the way we manage those programs, to modularise them and to put them into different units so that they can be delivered differently and be studied at different paces. Currently what we have as worldwide could very easily be an international centre of excellence for distance learning. And I think we could be collaborating with other people as they also recognise the importance of distance learning. A number of our members are now providing degrees at distance themselves. A number of other universities are realising that distance education is part of a hybrid offering. So lastly, I wanted to talk about partnerships. The University of London admitted City University a few years ago now, and their contribution has been very good. The involvement with the Mayor of London has been, City Mayor of London, the Lord Mayor, has been very helpful. But I don't know whether there'll be any other members, true members of the university. But there will be, I think, partnerships to develop as we sort of develop our role in London. And one of those is Good Enough College, and we're having ongoing conversations with Good Enough as to whether they would like to become a partner of the University of London and us a partner of them. They already house about 800 students, 90% of which are University of London students. And we also use their facilities for conferences and so on. They're not a teaching organisation, but they are an organisation where we have a lot of affinity. And as we look forward, there could be other partner organisations that we want to consider. There are some around their doorstep, the British Library, for example, the British Museum. These are conversations that we'll be having, I think, as part of the next strategic plan. As we develop these ideas more, we would like to engage all of you in your own ideas of how the university is going to be in 5 years' time, in 6 years' time. This would be the 2019 to 2024 strategy. And part of that will be focus groups, working groups, but also I think in your departments, I'd like to hear from you what you would see the university being in 6 years' time. Next, we have an item from Caroline. I think Mark's going to contribute to this as well in terms of procurement. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to give a quick update on some new developments. We've recently published our new policy. It's based on the scheme of delegation and changes to that. So it's on the internet, look out for it. If you've got any questions on that, please do come and ask either myself or a member of the team. We'll be really happy to talk through any aspects of that at all. I'm going to move on swiftly because we've only got about 3 minutes. So I'm going to try and just get to the point really, and I understand that there have been a number of questions on the process for procuring hard FM services and the role of the impact statement of that. At the moment we're developing our requirements. We're trying to understand what we need as a service going forwards, and trying to remember within that it's our responsibility to create high quality, efficient, value for money FM services that will be underpinned by a sustainable workforce for the future. And this service needs to represent our values as the University of London. And on that basis, we will be developing a balanced scorecard, bringing together all of the things that are important to us as an institution for a fair and transparent evaluation. We will give much more detail about this in the next FM briefing, and I think it will be more important to talk about that in more detail there. We will, of course, also conduct an equalities impact assessment throughout this process. So I'm really grateful to Mark Harrison, who I will hand over to and ask him to explain a little bit more in detail about, as quick as we can, about how these assessments will be applied.
Thank you, Caroline. So, as Caroline has mentioned, we're going to be undertaking quality impact assessment as part of the FM review. You may well ask, what is an equality impact assessment, which is a fair question. When I was thinking about this, I thought of a good example. When I used to, many years ago, work in a housing sector, and we had a colleague who was, let's fair say, sceptical about the usefulness of equality analysis or equality impact assessment. And this particular person challenged me. He said, I bet you can't undertake useful equality analysis of a pest control policy. He thought he'd catch me out. So it was a bit daunting, but we looked at it very quickly, realised that what the key requirement of pest control is gaining access to people's homes. So we realised that communication is key, so we identified the tenants that might need translation of documents. We also identified the tenants that might not be able to read at all, so we had house-to-house visits arranged. And we also identified those single female tenants who might not want gangs of male operatives roaming around their home for cultural or religious reasons. We also contacted the local authority and got them involved with our tenants who had mental health issues, who were vulnerable, who might be alarmed by what we were doing. And having undertaken all these actions as a result of the Equality Impact Assessment, we were able to gain access much more easily to the homes that we needed to, and the pest control operation was much more successful. It was more efficient. The tenants were less stressed and they were less inconvenienced. So it goes to show that even the most bizarre policy can benefit from equality analysis. Everybody won, the tenants, the housing association, perhaps not the pests, but we won't go there. So I very much welcome the fact that we're going to be undertaking Equality Impact Assessment as part of an intrinsic part of our FM review process. It will be there to identify an unintended disadvantage that may be part of the process. And I would point out that I've spoken to equality and inclusion colleagues from across sectors where they have in-house staff, for want of a better phrase, and they've alerted me to some of the potential negatives, as well as the positives. We have to consider the negatives. So we know that, for example, low-grade staff, when they're brought in-house, can be surprised by the increase in pension contributions. There can also be a limited access, more limited access to taking overtime. There may also be, in a smaller team, less opportunity for staff to work flexibly around childcare, for example. And also we know that there's also increased competition for staff taking leave at the busy and popular times of the year around the school holidays. So I just think it's worth noting that there will be negative as well as positive impacts that we have to consider, and that it's in the interests of all that we complete a robust equality impact assessment as part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to just give a brief update on where we've got to with Leading Women this year so far. And the latest, as the Vice-Chancellor said, is the series of worldwide conversations. The first kicked off in London on the 19th of September, and this was the first. It was also the charter lecture, but it doubled as the first of the worldwide conversations. And there will be, you can see a panel there, the pictures of the panel behind, and the whole thing was chaired by the Honourable Mrs. Justice Stephen Crowe. The following conversations will take place and are taking place right around the world, 20 further conversations from Peru to Pakistan, and we are working in conjunction with the teaching centres around the world. Still to happen, well, the Bloomsbury Festival starts this week, and parts of the Bloomsbury Festival are the Senate Women, that starts tomorrow here in Senate House, and the Flaneurs Diaries. And then on the 1st of November, the Sound of Suffrage concert. So various activities, and at the same time, and you might have spotted things happening in Torrington Square, the art installation. There was, if you remember, a student competition for an art installation to commemorate the whole event and the whole of the 150 years. Ariel Say from UCL won that competition, and the installation, which you can see in the bottom square, will be unveiled in November. So things are still happening. And as part of this, but also to celebrate our students, so I'm really masquerading it as part of this, but I'd like to celebrate our students, and I'd like to invite Dr. Yvonne Jacobs, who's the Associate Director of the Undergraduate Laws Programme, to tell you a little bit about our students, because you don't often hear about them, and I think they're probably the most important people not in the room.
Thanks, Mary. So I'd just like to spend a few minutes sharing some of the stories of some of our undergraduate law students this year, and just share in their own words where they explain their experiences of what studying for a University of London degree was like for them and how much it meant to them. So we had 23 first-class students this year, which is the most we've ever had. To put it in perspective, we have over 15,000 students on the programme, so it's really a tiny percentage of all of our students, so they really are the exceptional students. In terms of breakdown, Pakistan for about the 5th year is by far our top performing country, so 9 of the students who got first class from Pakistan. We had 4 from Malaysia, 2 from Sri Lanka, 2 from Jersey, 2 from Hong Kong, and then 1 each from Bangladesh, Canada, Russia and Germany. So it's quite nice, that's the most countries we've had represented amongst our first class students. So because Pakistan was our top performing country, I'd like to introduce you to all of our first class students from Pakistan. We had Saliha, Minhal, Manor, Shabano, Rupra, Ramsha, Amina, Ima and Fatima. So the more observant ones of you will notice that we have all women who got first class from Pakistan. Very fitting when we're celebrating leading women, so it's a great achievement. Just to hear in some of their own words what their experience was like, so we have Amina, and she's written a much longer article which was in the London Connection. She says to say that it's been a long journey is an understatement. It's been a journey of scepticism, persistence and ultimately success. It's a journey that I never thought I would undertake and one which I now cannot imagine my life without. And then Ima says, I developed an undying commitment to achieve a goal, took strategic actions, learned from my mistakes, and kept going despite feeling defeated and celebrated small milestones. My overall result has taught me that self-belief and discipline is the key. And Ramsha explains, when I first chose to enroll in the University of London, I was unsure of what to expect. The following 3 years were an absolute whirlwind, one filled with plenty of stress, all-nighters, and a seemingly never-ending pile of coursework. I could never have imagined the roller coaster that my life had become. I think she's recovered from it now. And then Rupra says, having achieved this milestone, I can finally say that hard work and prayers do work, and one should never give up on what you truly believe in. And one of the nice things about the contributions of these students, these appear in a blog on our VLE, and they do go on to inspire future students, so they're very generous in sharing their experiences with us. Alicia from Malaysia, now she explained that one of the reasons she decided to do the degree was because of her elder brother, and he'd inspired her to do well. What she didn't say was that her elder brother Daniel also got a first class degree in 2013, so he appeared in our 2013 blog, and only 10 students that year got a first. So really exceptional that 2 students from the same family are both in our first class club. And then Jile from Malaysia, so she has a lovely statement. And she said that she'd like to share a quote that a kind person once shared with her. And the quote was that the very things that hold you down are going to lift you up. And that comes from Timothy Mouse and Dumbo. And then we have Dalmini from Sri Lanka. And she says, my goal of getting a first class degree started with the inspiration I got from the 3 Sri Lankan first class holders among the 10 in the world in the academic year 2015-16. So it's lovely that she was inspired by the words of some previous first class students, and her words are hopefully going to go on to inspire not just Sri Lankan students, but other students as well. And then we have Sephora from Bangladesh. A lot of our students took this opportunity just to thank the people who helped them along on their journey. And she says that her biggest inspiration is her parents. She said, they've always believed in me and encouraged me to pursue my dreams. I believe through hard work, determination and perseverance, you can certainly achieve your dreams. And the final extract from Tatiana in Russia. And she kind of summed up what being a University of London graduate means to her. She said, it's a great honour to graduate from this august institution and a wonderful privilege. I would like to thank the University of London and associated staff in Moscow for their help during my studies. Thank you all so very much. So I'd just like to leave you the faces of all of our the first class students who sent in their photos. You'll notice there are some men there as well. So we do have some leading men. We're celebrating leading women just for now, but we're equally proud of all of our first class students. Hopefully it also serves as a reminder to us, as Mary said, of why we do what we do. This is our end result. Thank you.
And then to share a little more with you, as the Vice-Chancellor said, we have been shortlisted in the higher education, let's call them Oscars, the Higher Education Awards, and we've been shortlisted for the International Impact Award. And our entry was based on the theme of freedom, freedom from injustice and freedom from disease, with 2 programs. Remember, our member institutions or our member consortia provide the academic direction. Our member institutions being, in these cases, the Undergraduate Laws Programme Consortium and London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And the 2 programs were cited as having had a significant demonstrable impact across the world under the theme of pre-freedom. So let me tell you a little more about that. The Undergraduate Law Programmes Partnership is particular one that we mentioned is with the African Prisons Project. And this was about empowerment, empowering 63 prisoners with the knowledge to handle their own legal proceedings during the year in particular case, 16 to 17. And there you see a picture of Susan Kigula, who enrolled on the LLB and then successfully campaigned to abolish the death sentence in Uganda following her release. And she provided legal counsel as a result of her law studies to other inmates who were also subsequently freed. And University of London Undergraduate Laws Programme's partnership with APP, the African Prisons Project, has enabled, therefore, life-changing education to be made freely available among African prisoners. And also to give advice to women suffering from domestic violence to free themselves and others from life-threatening trauma. So a huge, huge contribution to freedom from injustice. And then freedom from disease. We work with London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. They provide the academic direction. And one Zimbabwean master's graduate, for example, remember there are many, many examples, this is one example, who has worked on pediatric trials, HIV trials, including the Zenith trial in Harare in Zimbabwe. And that aimed to reduce virulence and suppress HIV in children. And this has improved outcomes for more than 150 children with HIV. So it gives children who are infected with HIV an improved chance of a healthier life. An amazing set of contributions. We have, however, some interesting competitors who are also shortlisted. And the School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine itself for one of its own programs. There you are. So there our competition, and we'll find out on the 29th of November at the awards ceremony. So keep your fingers crossed till then.
That's a brilliant project, Mary. Absolutely brilliant. Congratulations. So let me get my glasses. Okay, the first thing I want to say is that is to underline what Chris Cobb said at the beginning about the future of SAS and the future of the university. And I do think, despite a little bit of the hiccups I'm going to describe in a moment, I do think that trajectory is upwards, and it's upwards realistically, and it has to be upwards because you can't stand still. Things that stand still eventually atrophy. So my ambition for SAS over the next period is to think expansively and to think in terms of how we might properly represent the community of humanities scholars over the next decade. But we've got a bit of work to do before we get there, and so what I thought it would be helpful to do is just talk you through one or two of the situations we've got in SAS, just so you understand if SAS colleagues you're working with are looking preoccupied at the moment. SAS has got essentially three sources of revenue, and I'm sorry this is going to be about finance mainly, but that's the tilt of the times just now. It receives core funding from a government body. Hitherto that's been the Higher Education Funding Council, HEFCI. It has an investment contribution from the University of London, which is very helpful and supportive, and it has the income which it earns itself. Now the first two of those, the money which comes from government and the money which comes from the university, are currently under periodic review. I won't say anything about the University of London side of it because that's rather waiting on the outcome of the first one, which is the government side in review. The money which comes from, hitherto from the Higher Education Funding Council is about half, just under half of SAS's revenue. It's about 8.5 million quid. And it is under periodic review every 5 or 6 years to see whether that will continue. There are a number of complicating factors though at the moment. As you'll know, HEFCE was abolished earlier this year in April. So there is an issue about where responsibility for SAS will lie in the future. And we're trying to manage that situation at the moment. Interim responsibility lies with Research England, which is the research bit of HEFCE, which has gone into UKRI. I can imagine you glazing over with all these acronyms at the moment, but just stay with me for a bit. And the other thing that's hanging over this is that 2019 will be a year for a governmental comprehensive spending review. That's slated, where it looks at everything which is government spend and asks, do we carry on doing this and at what level? It's called in the jargon zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting is where you assume you will get nothing and you have to argue for what you will get. So we're facing a really quite tricky situation in terms of how we manage it. Research England have launched a review of SAS, as I've said, and that's underway at the moment. The kinds of outcomes that will produce are, will the funding continue? Which agency can we trust to deliver that funding in a reliable and helpful way? How much will the funding be? SAS has been flatlining in this funding for a decade now, so we're putting in a bit of a plea for an uplift. Whether that's successful or not, we don't know. And how long will this funding be in the future? Again, this usually is time limited, and the period is usually about 5 or 6 years. So we've got those uncertainties, and we've got the greater uncertainty around Brexit. But there is also a very interesting bit of good news, that it is cross-party policy now in government to raise the spending on research and development in Britain from what is currently 1.7 to around 2.4. Different parties have a slightly different figure. The gross scale of this is enormous. Currently, public spending on R&D is 11 billion a year. That would raise it to 20 billion a year. So there is going to be more cash, there's going to be more opportunity, unless, of course, Brexit screws the whole thing up, in which case we're back in trouble. The review is underway at the moment. We had to submit very detailed paperwork by 21st of September, which we did on time and to format, and I appeared before the review panel last week. We will, I think, get some, at least fairly reliable indication, absolute indication, of the outcome this side of Christmas, because my understanding is that this review will go to the Council of Research England in late November. Then it enters the spending review 2019, and I just know from having spent several years of my life working in government that there you don't make predictions and you don't make assumptions, and that will be a hard-fought campaign as you try and argue with civil servants and politicians and so forth about why it should be spent on this rather than all the other claims on their spending. So I'm largely optimistic about this without being complacent. I do think it'll come out on the right side, but it's going to be a rather daunting, or has been a rather daunting, will continue to be a rather daunting period for us as we try and mobilise the best evidence for our case. But I'll just end on a very positive note. As I say, the third strand of income is earned income, and that includes all sorts of things, from events through to student fees, through to postgraduate courses, through to grant applications, and so on. And here the story is encouragingly rising. And I'll just identify one of these, that the average expectation in grant-giving bodies in the UK is that you'll have a success rate of around 20%, so that 1 in every 5 applications for grants will succeed on average. Last year, our success rate in SAS was 34%, which is very much off the map, actually, in terms of the way that these things happen nationally. So a big thank you to the research team who developed that in SAS, and to colleagues who put in these very terrific applications. And we're increasing the range of funders and the number of applications, and that can only be a good sign. David Cantor's wonderful achievement in winning the THE award, and I very much hope that the worldwide entry succeeds similarly this year. David Cantor's award-winning project last year was only a tip of a very substantial iceberg. But so our hopes are that this will continue, that things will continue to get on the uplift, and that we, over the next year, devise a very ambitious programme for SAS and for the humanities in the UK worldwide. Just worth remembering, we are the best in the humanities, the best performing nation in the world for humanistic research, and we don't say that loudly enough or often enough. So a big round of applause for humanists everywhere.
Okay, thank you, Peter, thank you, Caroline, thank you, Mark, thank you, Mary, thank you, Rick, sorry, Yvonne. We've now got questions that were posted ahead, so if you've got questions from the floor, then start thinking of them. The questions that were given to us ahead, there are some around Della Hall, which I'm going to summarise around protocols, I think. So taking all the best bits out of the salad and leaving the feta cheese. I think just bear in mind there's a fairness here. So there's a 2-hour sort of lunch period. So just treat the salad bar with some equality. There's also one about protocols of using the booze. They're highly popular, the booze, and I can see why. But they do get a hold, and if there's only one person in there, then I think there's some reticence, particularly around the lunch periods where people want to sort of get together for lunch. So can you also be careful about your use of the booze, and if you are an individual, then use the tables perhaps. Then we've got one around the locking down procedure of the lower ground floor. We are locking it down at 6 o'clock now, and that was instigated during the student protest. I think while the security is still, 7 o'clock, I do beg your pardon, it's locked down at 7 o'clock. While the security risks are still there with regards to student occupation, I'd rather prevent than manage one. And so we'll keep that going, but we'll keep a watching brief on it. If we feel that the security threat is lessened, then we'll reopen it indefinitely as with the rest of the building. We have a very specific question, and one that I'm glad it was raised, because I think it is worth considering. There are now very high costs on getting visas to come to work in the UK, Tier 2 visas, which are sometimes prohibitive for non-EU nationals. And as with a number of other institutions, we're now looking at whether or not the university should contribute to some of those costs. So that is something that we are actively looking at. Thank you for raising it. Well did. And then we also have one about getting a university cat to deal with the mice problems. They may be pets, I don't use mice, but no, I think they are a problem. And some of the problem is around food being left out and so on. So I think we need to actually be careful in the way in which we leave food out. But a cat is quite a nice idea. Last year, the university I worked at had a university cat, but it does bring with it issues with regards to allergies and other things. So I'm not sure how we consider this, but it's certainly something that we will give some thought to. Is there anything else from what you've heard today? Yes, hand at the back. Can you shout? I'm not sure we've got microphones.
Angela Jelfs. I'm going to put my school trustee hat on. So my question's actually addressed to Mark Harrison, I suppose, but also to others. You picked up on the impact of pensions in an equalities impact analysis on people who are potentially going to be brought back in-house. I just wondered if you'd considered actually inviting the pension provider to come and give a presentation to staff to make them aware that perhaps the cost of being an employee, the pension contribution from the employee side is possibly not as high as the sort of headline figure of 3%. So I just wanted to put that in your...
Go ahead, Mark.
In short, we're at the beginning of the process, not the end. So I would say yes, we can do it.
Yeah.
It's not going to fall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll have to work with the employers of the contractors, but yes, absolutely.
One question
Okay.
is what is convocation?
Right, I'm going to pass on that one because right, I can do it vaguely from memory. Convocation is it was a community, I think, of alumni and employees of the university, but a very wide group, which was also part of a fundraising campaign. Go on, Bill, you take over.
University of London Convocation was established in the 1850s, and it was part of the governing process of the university. So Convocation was a collection of graduates of all the university member institutions and anyone who had a connection with the university, as Chris said. So it was abolished in 2003, but up until that point it was able to elect things like the Chancellor. It did receive gifts, legacies, donations. When it was closed in 2003, there was 100,000 live members. And there is something called the University of London Convocation Trust, which is an endowed fund, and our endowments work that we've got assets of about £2.5 million. And it gives out grants each year to things that support the University of London member institutions and our own students.
Thank you. Any others? Yes.
Are you allowed to tell us who's on the short list for the new Vice Chancellor?
For the Vice Chancellor? No, I can't say who's on the short list. But they are very significant individuals.
You mentioned earlier on about, the Vice Chancellor mentioned earlier on about increasing visitors to Senate House because of Killing Eve and the bodyguard. The Senate House has appeared in loads of things, and it's really hard to find out through the University of London website what Senate House has appeared in. Is there, I mean, obviously there must be someone in the building who does those bookings, and I know we can't be told ahead of time, but, you know, The Dark Knight Rises, Nanny McPhee and The Big Bang, and I watch these things, I'm like, oh, there's Senate House, and it'd be really great if there was a list somewhere on the website which had every show it's been in.
That's one for you, Sandra, I think.
I'm writing.
We will make sure it appears. Thank you. Yes.
Can I say some of those were on Wikipedia?
Oh, really?
Yes.
What, so if you type in Senate House, it comes up?
Senate House, and I actually had some.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, there you go. So we can plagiarise that then, Sandra. Okay. Good. Any others? Okay, great. Thanks very much, everyone.